I enjoyed the fellowship.
Now, how far is that from Cadiz?
At 9 miles. When we turned into Lake Barkley Resort, there was a sign, I think it said, maybe not quite 9 miles. 9 miles might have been before we got there. So under 10.
I lived at Cadiz, I was in junior high, so.
It was close. It was really close. So.
There she is.
All right, so does anybody want to pray to wrap this up? That was really good conversation.
You're a booger.
You want to pray or not? I will.
Yeah. So, but hey, before we do that, I want to go ahead and make sure, so I'm not here next week. Are you good? Will you good leading the discussion without me?
I can.
I
We
mean-
had it on the calendar, we weren't meeting next week.
Oh, well, that's
And
what
then
they were
we
talking
finished
about.
up
That's what she was asking, yeah.
I'm
I knew it was
fine.
missing.
Okay, I'm fine either way, whatever we wanna do. Do y'all wanna take a week off?
The way it's on the Joy calendar, I mean, we can adjust it, is that we won't meet next week because we have First Thursday and you're on. And then we'll finish up the 2 weeks after that.
I'm fine with that.
So that you're here for all of the book. Does that work for everybody?
I'm gone
Or-
a couple of weeks anyway, so
Okay.
I'll wait for the rest of the book.
Gail's out next. The next two, so. I am gonna go ahead and read the rest of the book while I'm on vacation, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, I'm
So you're
going.
only gone next week, right?
Yes.
Okay.
After this, we'll probably run last week too.
Yeah,
No, we're not meeting next week.
we will not meet next week.
Okay, not meet next week.
Yeah, I've already had.
We'll get you back to that
the
last
person
week,
that's
then we'll
reading
give you a
it.
test.
We're gonna do another one of these, another book study. Oh, no, it's on the calendar.
You know, so in we won't do anything for the summer as far as like this. And then in the fall, we're gonna do, a Bible study again. We're gonna go through the book of James.
All right.
So,
Yeah, good.
so we'll do that one. And then we'll do Joy reads again in the spring.
I'm
Well, then-
already working on finding one.
The James, that'll start in September probably, or after school starts back.
Yeah.
Now, last time we did Nathan's book, this time we did a fictional book. Do you guys have a preference between nonfiction and fiction?
I used to have a preference toward nonfiction, but I found out I like this a lot better than I thought I would. This is good. I do not
So
have one.
if we pick fictional books that are like this and or stay with nonfiction.
Will you ever do Nathan's book again?
Yeah, we try to start with this one always, that's fiction.
No, but maybe we could do a next book.
Did we video his too, didn't we?
Mhm.
Yeah. I need to, so it's on the Joy page.
Yeah,
Let me go
We
back
may or
and
may
look.
not be working on another one.
Nathan's book.
Yeah, he did Worthless.
Yeah, we kind of, that was
Yeah.
one that didn't.
He's working on another.
Is it worthless too?
No, the next one is still worthless.
It's still worthless every day.
Maybe worth even less.
Yeah.
I hope not, I'm working on it.
Well, you gonna pray for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Father, we just, we thank you for the many ways that you use us, and we thank you for the diversity of the gifts that you've gifted us all with, and I guess right now I'm thinking about Randy Alcorn, Father. You gifted him with the ability to write like this. You gifted him with his spiritual background as a minister of the gospel, and he crafted something that's just so appealing to both believers and non-believers, Father. And I just love the way you use so many different things to try to reach out to everyone, and we're thankful for that, and we're thankful for this time we get to spend together going over this book. We just ask you to be present with us, Father, and let our minds and hearts focus on the discussion, and also focus on you at the same time, Father, and just anything we can do to draw nearer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, well, we're gonna start off in chapter 16. Chris thinks I was telling him we were talking about this, and I sat down and was reading, it was Lazy No, so Monday, I was off Monday, and, me and Dee Dee went and, did some things together Monday morning, and then Monday afternoon, I had cutting grass and a few things, and after that, I sat down to get something to drink, and the favorite part of my house is my front porch. Our front porch swing, I love it, and the breeze was blowing, and we got wind chimes, and they were going, and I said, oh, I'm fixing to read. And so, the breeze was blowing just perfect where I could put my feet up on the porch swing, and it moved it just a little bit. And I sat there and read, and I had my pen and everything handy, and as I started reading, I was like, I'm just gonna read this week. So I didn't underline anything, but I have to tell you, I probably should have, cause I'm gonna have trouble going back and finding some stuff, but, there were several times this week to where, man, I just come under conviction, and, I was like, wow, that's been me, at times in my life, and, so, anyway, what was y'all's thoughts as far as this week's reading?
You had that one character that put off his decision and he died.
Yeah.
Making all the excuses you do, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Get around to it later.
He didn't pull any punches this week.
Mm.
I mean, this is kind of one of those, as I was thinking, reading through this, it's kind of like that movie where no character is safe, and things start happening, and you're like, I can't believe they killed off that character right then. It was just one of those. I mean, it was. That happened twice,
Yeah.
and even 3 if you want to think back to Sean.
Yeah.
She was talking about Sean when we sat down, talking about cause he's thinking about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, and we started having conversation yesterday, then the whole deal with David, it was just, and not only David, but the 3 guys that was in jail.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so much.
And they
Yeah,
weren't,
Mike
they
mentioned
really
that in
weren't in
Sunday
jail.
school.
They weren't confined, actually, they could've walked out.
could've walked
anytime.
out.
But they felt
They were self-confined.
Yeah.
And so I'm not even gonna lie, Christine, as I was reading that, I was like, oh, Christine's having a field day with this one. I was sitting, and you gotta tell me if I'm right, I literally, I'm not even kidding.
What?
I literally giggled when it was the 3 guys, in the jail.
Your own making.
Yeah.
And I would
I was sitting there, I said, oh, I cannot wait to hear what Christine, that counselor mindset, I could just see the cogs turning.
And when you walked by us yesterday and I was talking to him about David, I said, that still confuses me about, what Chad said about, everything not as it seems, but did he cross the chasm? Because that's when Nick was looking at Salome because, she didn't go, and so when he turned back around, the woodsman was coming for him, and David was gone, and Victoria was gone, so he didn't actually see them cross. So I was telling him, I said, well, did he cross or not? How did he get here?
Well, and that's that part where we realize it's not linear, cause they're
That's what
back
he
in the
said.
same land, and we see it that revisited with the cave, like the cave shows up again. With
But it's
the
not the
same,
same cave, it's a tunnel.
maybe,
Oh, you're saying it just looks different.
maybe it's not the same cave.
Yeah,
Maybe it is.
yeah,
It says they see all
Well,
the same
Glenn
stuff
said it's not one
here.
side or the other, he said that's the mistake you make.
and everybody comes to the chasm at a different part in their journey.
Yeah.
And because that's what Shannon said, it's like, hey, we have the opportunity, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but, our position changes from, when we come to Christ, once we're needing salvation, and then once we cross the chasm, then our goal is to lead other people. And he said that,
But
so.
we're in the same land.
Yeah, but we're in the same land, and he said, we get to walk with those people at different places. And so we kind of, And it really is, it's kinda hard to wrap your mind around, because we kinda think everybody is walking and all of a sudden we walk up to the Grand Canyon and we're thinking linear, and how do we all get to the other side all at the same time? But we all come to a chasm that we have to cross, but we all get there different ways, different times, different points in our life.
Well, I just hope that we find out more about Shad, because, you know, he got interrupted before he talked to Nick Moore, you know, when he asked him, you know, how did you get here, where did you come from? But it's like, he talked about that, you know, about all the things that have happened to him a little bit, cause that's the part that gets me with him. Maybe by the end of the book, he comes clean.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hanging in there. I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you, I have confidence in Randy's writing. Everything has worked out, or the way I don't think that he's gonna leave us hanging. A couple of people in here already know, but even if there is kind of that, because I could also see this book ending with, hey, we're not gonna wrap it up all nice and tidy for you, because every person has to figure this out. And if he does that, I think it will be in such a way that will be, you know.
Or read my next book, and you'll find that.
Well, and I
What
think he's
about-
giving an opportunity, like he's providing mirrors for us the whole way through, like all of 16 is a mirror
That's
to
right.
what we hold
Yeah.
as a treasure and where our heart is, and
But what about when he said to Nick, did you take the opportunity to witness to that man? And he didn't,
Yeah, when he's talking with Marcus.
yes. And I thought, how many times, how many people do we meet that we don't? And I have a neighbor across the street that I've been praying about and asking the Lord to give me the courage, because they're great friends, and I don't want to offend them, but I don't want to see them go to hell either, And, it's a hard place.
Well, let's jump with it.
I love the progression you see with him though, like Blue Coat comes along, he doesn't really say anything, I don't want to offend him, that voice inside was going, no, 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 now is not the time, and then he finds out later he dies.
Yeah.
And then he comes to Alex, and this time he says something, and it says he sings the songs, and he tells them all the things. And so while Alex remains the same and disinterested, and kind of giving this, yeah, I dabble in it, but then you see his backpack is really old and ancient and not used very well. But you see progress in Nick, willing to speak up, say
And
something.
then you come to Grady and goes even further.
Yeah, and he brings Gordy along with
Or
him.
Gordy, not Grady,
And
Gordy.
didn't David discourage him
Which I
from
think
the
is
first
funny that
time? Blue Coat, didn't he say, now's not the time, and all that, didn't he say a bunch of stuff to try to tell him not to talk with him, or?
He said he heard a voice because, Marcus actually even says, you got to make sure you're listening to the right voice.
Yeah.
And what I thought was profound too is like when Alex died, it just stopped. And it's like, none of the characters then commented on that. And it leads you to the point where you're contemplating what happened and what it meant. It's deeper than if you hear someone else say, well, make a comment on it. But it's just like, and he died. And you're just like, and it just kind of wipes all the way through you, But that was important that he didn't, because then everybody then had that feeling of how you felt about it.
Cause that was the only one encounter that he had a chance. He didn't take advantage of it, there was not another opportunity.
But like Christine said, he's progressing, and you can see him thinking about this more and more.
absolutely. Well, hey, I'm gonna hit some questions, we're gonna backtrack just a little bit, but in chapter 16, first question was, why were the travelers that Nick's group met so attached to their possessions, even though they made it harder to climb the mountain? As I was watching that, which we kind of see this materialism. We saw it with this group, and then they meet Mr. Bartholomew, and, you know, they see everything that he has, and you see this love of stuff, but I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, like, it kind of stung me, because
Aren't you attached to some of your things?
yes,
We all are.
yes, I am.
Find the story of the rich young ruler too.
Yeah.
That he just couldn't let go of the wealth.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they were going up the hill, and I mean, Shad's telling them, hey, it's much easier if you just let go of that stuff right there. I mean, how many times is our love for non-eternal things weighing us down and keeping us from being who God would have us to be? I think this is the point right here, because you know, you're still wrestling with, is this book written more for believers or non-believers and everything? And I think right here we see, hey, he's talking to believers right here.
And Malaki chimes in, you know, about that, you know, the woman, you know, she said, if you have less, you'll have less to worry about. But then the woman comes back again to her and says, well, what are you doing talking? You're carrying big heavy sacks. But she said, yeah, but the king told us to carry these.
Yeah.
You know, so they're all dealing with this.
And we're starting to hear more about those sacks of stones, because it's like, yeah, the heavier they are, though, the lighter they feel.
Yeah, cause my burden is light.
Yes. And so you're starting to see this. I'm gonna tell you, as I was reading that part, it took me back to Ecuador. Ecuador is, you know, I mean, you guys know, I mean, I've been there, I don't know, 30-something times now.
30-something?
Yeah, I've been going since 2008, and there were several years, I made 3 trips down there in a year. But one of the things that is so beautiful whenever I get down there is the simplicity of their lives. And it's so funny, as it's overwhelming to North Americaners whenever we get down there, especially in the jungle region, in the mountains too, but in the jungles, when the kids come, they're like, well, they didn't bring nothing with them. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's because they don't have anything. Or, you know, what they came with is, that's the shoes they have, that's the outfit that they have, and, you know, we can give them another, and everything, and we feel sorry for them, but and which I still want to provide stuff for them. I mean, you know, like we take dresses and shorts and stuff that the Sisters and Stitches make for us, and it's a great blessing. But there is a freedom in that simplicity. I mean, we're expecting them to just be sad and distraught and devastated, and yet what we do is we spend 4 or 5 days and we see kids full of joy and laughter and happiness. And even the adults, like I went into a house one day, we did a home visit, and when we went in, the only electric was one light bulb that hung from, it was a square room about the size of these tables, and there was blankets in 3 corners, and just on dirt floor, and that was the beds. There was the parents' beds, the children's bed. There was a stove, an old electric stove that they had gotten found somewhere, but it didn't work, and they had just gutted it, and they would build a fire in it and close the door and let the heat come up through the top. They had cut the eyes out. These people had nothing, and yet they were so full of joy. And you're talking about a trust in the Lord. Like we were talking to them, and we were just talking about how we could pray for them and everything, and they were just talking. I mean, they were so content. And to hear them say, you know, we're praising God. We had a meal this morning, and our stomachs are full, and so we're trusting Him to feed us again tomorrow. I was like, that's when my eyes was opened in Ecuador, because in my arrogance I used to go, hey, I love the opportunity to go serve the least of these. It was in Ecuador that I found out I'm the least of these.
That's exactly why I'm gonna make sure my grandson goes this summer.
Yes, I'm excited that he's going. It's,
Well, yeah, I'll make sure he does.
but I thought about that, you know, these people were locked into all these things, and those things have zero eternal significance. And I felt shame for the times that I have, like withheld, or I'll give you an example. You know, I love woodworking and stuff, so I have a lot of tools, and I am super hesitant about loaning my tools out because I've had stuff loaned out that didn't come back broke or whatever else. And they are, I mean, they're expensive. But, I mean, generosity is the overflow of what Christ does in us. Why would I ever be more concerned about something that has zero eternal significance over being able to be a blessing to somebody else? Because when we love and when we bless other people, that's something that does have eternal significance. And so, I mean, I'm still wrestling with it. I mean, I'm still not gonna go, yeah, hey, here's my $800 paint sprayer. Go ahead and just have fun with it. Hope it works out good, you know, but I mean, trying to have the right heart attitude. And I saw that with him. It just made it so much harder. What kind of things do we try to carry with us in life that inhibits us from serving the King?
Well, we stock up on things, of course, there's so much fear in the media, you know, oh, the government's gonna take this, or your job's gonna disappear and all, so we stock up on things, we got so much extra stuff. And, then, like you mentioned, trust in God. You know, God's got you this far, and you haven't gone hungry, and you've always had something to wear, and He knows what you need. And I know that because I occasionally hoard things. And I may have mentioned, you know, like, during the COVID thing, you know, you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere. You go to 6 stores to find toilet paper, so then the natural thing is, oh, I better get 12 packages of toilet paper because who knows when I'll find some more. And, you know, we get carried away hanging on to worldly stuff.
Yeah. Or when a storm's gonna come through, or,
Yeah.
you know.
Remember the earthquake preparedness kit and Ivan Browning, you know, and get your bottled water and your batteries and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I still have a garage full.
I'm not running out, I'll just stop by here.
Mine are
You're in the
Jimmy's,
country,
either
I've got
one.
I think for most
You know,
of us.
we ladies have closets full of clothes. There's no, I mean, way too many clothes.
You're getting personal.
But seriously,
And
you know,
shoes.
talk about those children that have one outfit until we go down there and you go down there and bring clothes to them. And it's sad to think that here we've got all of these clothes.
Hey, so Jenny went with us one year and noticed there was a woman that came with the kids. I'm pretty sure it was Jenny. She might have if she's told you the story, I'm pretty sure it was Jenny though, because she went with her granddaughter. And she noticed she was barefoot. And so Jenny had a pair of flip-flops or sandals or something, and she gave to her, and this woman was in her 50s, and she broke down crying. It was the first pair of shoes she had ever had. I was in Mexico on a trip one time.
To get her.
She volunteered you to.
They were good. They were good. I was on Mexico. We went down one time at my previous church on a choir tour. The kids was on a choir tour, but they wanted to do some construction, so I went with them. And the day before we flew in, a family's house burnt down. And so as soon as I got there, I separated from the group. I did not speak Spanish very well, and there was no English speakers with me. I had a pocket full of money and my tools. And I show up into this village, and the houses are palapa tree houses. Palapa trees get like this. It literally looked like Gilligan's Island. And so we were building, going and getting concrete and stuff, and we built the house. Well, the neighbors had a little boy that, kept coming over and wanted to, play around and stuff, and so I would play with him and, everything. His shoes were 2 water bottles with strings, holes poked in them and strings.
Oh my gosh.
And so we had brought a bunch of stuff, and so whenever we finished the house and they come and got me, we were able to get some clothes and give to him for him and his family, and stuff. But I mean, we really do, we get locked into, our stuff, and there's a real danger.
Work with it for
And
free.
we start having faith in what we possess rather than who we belong to.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that stood out to me on page 203 is that we're all gonna carry something.
Yeah.
So whether it was the possessions or it was the bags of stone, like, we all have faith in something, we all trust in something, something is always our master, something that we're always carrying. We have a choice in that, but I loved when he said, it's not the hill that's the problem, it's everything you're trying to carry up it, and I think that that's really speaking to believers, that our faith climb is so difficult because we wanna love all these things, all these ways of being, all these mindsets with us, unforgiveness, like it's not just the treasures that we have on the outside, it's also the things that we treasure on the inside, like our anger and our bitterness and our rightness in things, that make it really difficult rather than, what Malaki says, and we carry what God tells us to carry. And so he says, carry my word, carry my armor, carry a heart for people, and we're carrying, all these other things that are not what he's called us to carry. And then it goes on to says, a lot of this stuff that you have, it's good, and hey, thank God for it, but it's all moth and rust, it's all gonna be expendable. The guidebook says we shouldn't hold anything too close in the short today that will not be ours in the long tomorrow. It commands us to travel light. And I went and looked that up.
That was so good.
And the Message version did a really good job of showing that in Luke 10 and in Luke 22. Jesus literally tells them, travel light, like only take your toothbrush, kind of thing. And so we're to travel light on the outside, not be attached to the things that we have. And even the stuff that we have is not ours to own, it's ours to use for the kingdom. And then to travel light with the stuff that's on the inside, and light being a play on words, because so much of what we carry internally is darkness.
And if you try to imagine that if maybe your house was caught on fire or you're being evacuated or something, if you think for a minute about what would I grab first? If I was only gonna be able to take just a handful of things with me, what I would carry, it makes you think about what you're treasuring.
Mr. Bartholomew's mansion, it was really enticing. It's easy to see why the travelers would be tempted to stay. But why do you think it was wrong to stay?
I think it's funny you called him Timothy Bartholomew. The play on words there was remarkable.
Cause they were only wrong because they were counting on what they could see as compared to what they had been promised. They couldn't see it yet.
It was temporary. It was what was right now.
And it was the house of my dreams. It was all the stuff that we long for.
Well, that's one of the things that, I just got thinking about how easy, let me back up. So we believe that the enemy can't do anything with our relationship with Christ. Once we belong to Christ, we're secure in Christ. So what can he do? He can distract us so that we become ineffective and unproductive. And the easiest way for the enemy to distract me is to get me to think about me. And whenever they got to that mansion, everybody started thinking about, well, those who wanted to stay was thinking about themselves. Everybody had their own room, everybody had their own bathroom, everybody was comfortable. There was anything I wanted to eat was there. I got to go and do anything, I ride horses or whatever I wanted to do. It was all about comfort and pampering ourselves.
Not one time did they think about other people and, reaching out to anybody else.
And then Mr. Bartholomew even said, well, what do you all think about all my stuff? All my land and my horses and stuff, and they were all going on about it, and then Shad said, well, he said, I think you're gonna have a hard time leaving all of this. And David got mad, and how dare you be rude to this man, you know, but he said, I told the truth.
Spoke the truth.
Well, I kinda likened it to the Garden of Eden, when it says Eve is looking at the fruit longingly, and that's what you see in all of them, it's just kind of this gazing at the land, gazing at the house, gazing at the horses, and going, setting themselves up as Lord of it all.
And it's kind of saw some of the rich young ruler in there in that statement that he made, and I mean, you know, so I'm gonna talk about a guy that I knew, but I mean, I'm just as guilty, but I think why we have to be so careful with amassing a massive amount of possessions, cause it does a couple things to us. One, we start to believe in our own abilities. But I used to work for a guy whose dad helped him get started in business. Gave him $300,000 to buy a convenience store, and so he did. At 18, he owned his first convenience store, and Keith is very smart, very sharp, very business-minded, and ended up, whenever he was in his early 30s, when I went to work for him, he had a chain of convenience stores and had a grocery store and hardware stores, and was just doing really well. And he had so much stuff, he didn't believe he had a need for anything else. And, which, I mean, I know people who have a lot and give a lot away and do incredible things, so it's not just in and of itself, but I think there's, when you read the story of the rich young ruler, you know, what must I do to follow you? Well, you gotta keep all these, well, I've done that since I was young. Well, no, you didn't, you're believing that you had. Well, then sell everything that you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. And he walked away distraught because he was a person of much wealth. And there again, wealth is not a bad thing, because I know a lot of people that are wealthy that do incredible things with that wealth. And have, I mean, going back to Ecuador, I mean, we took a person to Ecuador one time that they saw a need down there for some land that Stephen was wanting to expand on and everything. And they went up to Steve and said, how much would it cost to get you this land? Steve said, they're trying to sell it, it's $150,000, you know, but I believe the Lord's gonna provide. And this person said, yeah, provide today, I'm giving you the money. I mean, I can't even imagine being able to give somebody $150,000, and they did it without blinking of an eye. But we have to be careful, because when we have a lot, we can start to believe in ourselves, trust in ourselves. And I think we see some of that, and it's contagious. I mean, David saw it, and which we know David's already having struggles anyway. I mean, David's had a lot of struggles. I mean, he wasn't. I'm right. He didn't have any. He wasn't carrying any stones, right? He didn't even get a sack, did he? I'm trying to remember.
What now?
David.
He did not take, no,
Yeah.
and Victoria did not either one take a sack.
Yeah. So.
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me too is when they're looking at it, and she said, oh, it's this sauna that you dreamed about on the mountain. I think sometimes we look at the indulgence and we look at the culture, and we're quick to go, you know, that's gluttony and misuse, but I think we forget sometimes how we weary in the battle, we weary on the journey, and we long for ease, we long for comfort, and how tempting that can be then when it's provided to want to veer off the path.
Yep.
To just rest. And you see that kind of play itself out at the end of the chapters that we're reading today, that concept of rest coming back into play. But Shad even says momentary ease isn't the answer the daily hardships of the road sharpen and deepen the man. And there's truth in what Shad says, but we're gonna see later, Shad's gonna take that to the extreme. And so we have that tendency too, so we're tempted, we have a tendency to take things to the extreme. And then one of the things that I challenge clients on all the time is living in their comfort zones. I say nothing, you don't grow in your comfort zone, and your comfort zone is the most dangerous place to be. And we see that with David, while he's comforted and there's wealth and joy and lushness about that lifestyle, like this is the most dangerous place that David could be. And it's in the most beautiful place that he could be physically.
The devil's got him right where he wants him.
And I think he does that to a lot of us.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big, you're talking about Ecuador, I remember seeing that in Guatemala when I was there in a mission trip, and kids would play with a Frisbee for hours and think it was the coolest thing ever, and I'm like, we have playrooms full of toys and kids are bored all the time. And I'm grateful to live in our country, I'm grateful for the freedom of religion and a lot of the other freedoms that we have, but I don't think we're as blessed of a nation as we pretend to be. I think we're cursed by our greed and by our pride and by the stuff that we own that really actually owns us. And the more we have, the more self-indulgent, self-entitled, period, whatever thing you wanna put after it, we have become, and then we think the rest of the world should be like us, and yet there's a lot we could learn from the rest of the world. Even, like I was on a cruise ship a couple weeks after it reopened, after COVID, and hearing the stories of how the crew members got through COVID, I'm like, we Americans would have never made it. Like, they didn't have stimulus packages, and they didn't have, you know, we're seeing some things that are in short supply, but they live that way all the time, and kind of the entitlement, and I don't wanna wear a mask if I don't wanna wear a mask, and they're going, we're sad because only some of us could come back to work, and we're willing to give up part of our contract so our friends can have jobs to feed for their family too. It was such a different mindset, and I'm like, y'all look more like Christ than a lot of us do. That was very, very humbling.
Well, I think about, just how much I take for granted every single day. How many times I've gone to my pantry and my kitchen and opened it up, and it's full of edible food from top to bottom.
Nothing you
And I'm like, man, there ain't nothing in this house for me. There's just nothing that I wanted. And then my mind will go back to Ecuador, and I'm like, man, I mean, how many families could be fed by what I'm looking at, and
As nothing.
as nothing, just because it's not what I want.
Right.
And they're grateful. I mean, literally, I could take a can of Ecuador of Bush's pinto beans, and there would be folks so grateful to have that. I mean, it don't matter that it's random. They're, okay, great, let's open it up, warm it up, we're good. Or you know what, we'll eat it straight out of the can, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's, I watched kids, you was talking about, you know, the kids with the Frisbee. We took crayons, and I'd never seen anything. The kids will literally take the crayons and carefully peel the wrapper back and color. And whenever they're done, they'll wrap it back and lick and stick it back so that everything is as pristine. I mean, it's like, that's a 97-cent box of crayons that we gave you, and it's like the best thing. I mean, you see kids walking around smiling, carrying their box of crayons. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think one day we're gonna have a rude awakening, because I think we're gonna be held accountable
For that.
for our wastefulness.
Yes.
From whom much has been given, much is expected.
Yep.
That's where we fail.
So, chapter 17, Shad had this question, so what did Shad mean? Because this was one of those statements that really, there's just certain things that happened that just stood out. And Shad said, you can't be the king's bride without giving up your other lovers. Yeah, that was one. So there were several, you're gonna kick out. There were several times I got off the swing and went inside, and Deidre was watching TV, and I was like, all right, pause this for a second. I wanna read you something. And like, I tried to give her like a 30-second preview of what the book was about, and I'm like, listen to this statement, and, you know, which she didn't appreciate it like I did, because she hadn't read the whole book, but that was one of those ones, I mean,
The Bible talks about how we prostitute ourselves.
yes, I mean, I got thinking about it, and this is one of the questions, like, how many lovers do I have in my life? And it just got, I mean, like, well, it would be real easy to go, well, I don't have anything in my, but what do I have in my life that, that takes more of my time than I give to Christ? Because anything in my life that gets more of me than Christ gets, that's a lover.
Your grandchildren. Our grandchildren.
Deidre scolded me a couple of weeks ago because we were talking about how much we love being in Paducah and how much we love Heartland, and she said, what would you do if God called us somewhere else? And I was like, oh, I kind of arrogantly, and I mean, part of it was joking too, but I was like, I'm gonna need to see that Daniel moment of the handwriting on the wall. I need to see that big old hand
It
says,
didn't go well for them,
no, it did not.
seeing the handwriting.
I know. Oh.
We'll all be praying otherwise, so.
Well, and I told her, I was like, I said, I hope and pray that I get to stay here. But the very fact that I would wince at that, because I would hate to leave my grandchildren,
Yes.
you know, I've gotta make sure that my grandchildren are things that I'm thankful for and blessings from God, and not things that I've put up on a pedestal that I worship more than I worship my God. And I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, I've probably crossed the line on that one on more than one occasion.
I don't know that God's upset that you would wince at that, because that's a blessing and a ministry that He's bestowed. But when we don't act in obedience,
Yeah.
and our behavior matches our wincing, and we pull back, like, it's natural to go, hey, I don't wanna give this up. Like, we see Jesus even tormented about this thing that he's about to do. You don't see God punishing him for that, and nor did He call that sin, because he was sinless. Like, it's a natural reaction that comes from a place of love. When we put that love above God, though, I've been reading another book called Lead.
There's a fine line in there.
Yes. Called Lead for God's Sake, and it talked about priorities. And kind of based on Revelation, where it says you've lost your first love. And it said often in the church we teach God first, and then marriage, and then family, then ministry. We kind of have this triangle with God at the top, and He said that's never how God designed it. He didn't want, like, first in your day and then you go off and do all the other things with everybody else. He wants to be at the center, and that in everything that you do, He's in the center of it. So He's in the center of how we love our stuff. He's in the center of our ministries. He's in the center of how we love our grandkids. Like, He's always the king. He's always the spouse, the husband to us, like the Bible says. And everything flows out of that place. It doesn't, like, start with Him and then we go to all these other, well, hey, I checked the box because I started my day with my devotions and now I'm done. Now I can go live my life. And that's how a lot of us have started to live. Like, as long as I put Him first, then I can have second, third, fourth. But first and only is what He actually says.
I like
And
that.
that everything flows out of Him. And so then when we love from that place of relationship and with Him as the foundation, then how we show up in those other areas of our lives look very different.
That's good.
I think these chapters are, when I first read the chapters about the chasm and they crossed over the tree and all that, you have the idea that they have all accepted Christ and they're on their way to the city. But these chapters of people they've met along the way, that's not always the case. And then Chad says there in 17, sharing the same ground and air and meals with chasm crossers doesn't make it one. So, and grateful that Nathan and you and all of our pastors, almost every time they speak, they talk about people that are sitting in the congregation, that they may have, I guess, crossed the chasm, but they still haven't given it all up for him.
What page is that on that you're, I remember
That's
reading it,
Mine's, my pages are different, cause I've got a hard,
15.
mine's 181, and y'all's is different.
Oh, okay.
Mine's a hardback, and the pages are numbered different.
Well, and you see that they're not all chasm crossers, cause most of the people that they meet are like, what chasm?
And even David, that's what I was talking to Glenn about yesterday. You assumed he had because he was going along the red road with him. And then just then, Marcus appeared. Oh, Marcus comes in at timely time.
Oh, I've gotta read, this was one of the things that I had to share with Deidre. Page 216 in my book, do you remember, Marcus asked, the man you passed on the road, the one in the blue raincoat? Sure, what was his name? I never asked. His name was Ed. You considered telling him of the king, did you not? Yes, and almost did, but the time wasn't right. And did you expect to have another time? Maybe I might bump into him later, I hesitated. I guess I just didn't want him to think I was a fanatic.
Yeah.
Are you not a fanatic then? I mean, I didn't want him to think I was pushy. And so you did not offer him the most important gift in the universe. You did not sing to him the music his songless heart longed to hear. No, I guess I didn't. You will stand before the audience of one, Marcus said. This is the one, you will stand before the audience of one. Men's opinions of you will not matter to you then. Knowing that, why do they matter so much to you now? And that was one, I had to stop. I stopped sitting on the swing and I was like, how many times have I worried what people would think of me? And I mean, it seems so legitimate. And like you hear, like even Nick, as he's saying this, like the excuses that he's given seem legitimate to him. But when I hear those things out loud, and whenever I've said those things out loud, try to stand before God and to say those things, they will seem so ridiculous.
So tacky.
Yeah, and I'm like, why would I be more concerned that somebody will think I'm weird rather than share life, or life-giving truth with somebody that desperately needs to hear it? It just doesn't even, when you say it out loud, it just doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy how we can even rationalize that in our minds.
Well, Paul says that, he says, if you're pleasing man, you're not pleasing God.
Yeah.
John Piper used to say that we will readily disobey God in order to look better in front of men.
Yeah.
Those are very challenging statements for both of them.
Yes.
Then after that, when he said, something told me not to bring it up, and Chad says, something or someone.
Yeah.
So, we always hear about the still small voice and, doing what we feel like we're hearing from it, but along with the still small voice is another voice.
Yeah. And we were, people, especially in this day and age, people are quick to equate that voice with like, well, the devil is after me and all this. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, I think my flesh has a voice, and that voice is so loud, and maybe my flesh is, hey, people's gonna think you're a weirdo if you're talking about all that Jesus stuff, and man, you're gonna look like a fool.
And it's the voice of fear.
Yeah.
Hate is not the opposite of love, fear is the opposite of
That's
love.
right.
It's the absence of
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
And read the last line on that page.
Yeah, and then he does what he did with Alex.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about it, there's
It
no mention
disappeared.
of it again.
Yeah, it
There's
changes
no
the
like
subject
dot,
completely.
or meanwhile. It just immediately shifts off of it and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I need to process this.
Yeah. It actually made me think about a time, so I used to be in the insurance business years ago, and I had my own agency. I was bivocational at the time, and I was always trying to witness to people and share the good news with people. And there was this client I had. Her name was Joyce Luster, and I prayed for her. She was rough as a cob, and I was like, man, I just really want to be able to. And I had talked to her about church, and in fact, I was a youth pastor and everything. Well, she came to my office and she was interested in something. I don't remember what it was, but I was in business mode, and we were talking, and she said something, and I didn't even hear it until afterwards. In the middle of us talking about insurance, she made this statement, and I'm telling y'all, and I don't know how I missed this. She said, you know, I've often wondered what it meant to be a Christian. And she left, and it hit me. I was like, oh my Lord, how did I not get that? And I want you to know that for several more years before I went into ministry full time, God opened that door. I tried and I tried and I tried, and she would never entertain any type of spiritual conversation whatsoever. And I've never forgotten about that. And I tried to be mindful of when, if people, you know, say, like if somebody says, hey, will you pray for me? Like I want to pray right then. If people ask me a spiritual conversation, I want to have that conversation right then. And I don't know, this brought it back, you know, hey, you know, there was a rock slide this morning, Ed died. Nobody will get the opportunity to talk with him again. You had an opportunity and you missed it. And you know, and I've prayed numerous times that, hey, Lord, please put somebody in Miss Joyce's path.
That's what I was thinking.
She'll listen to. But it's something I've never forgot.
And then the next sentence, like Rufine did,
You're
in
in a meadow.
a color cloak meadow. You know, and I'm like, wait just a minute, let's don't get in a hurry here.
Well, it reminds me of the parable when he's talking about the servants that were given the talents.
Yeah.
And in this case, Nick buries it. Like he's got this talent that he can share and he can multiply, you know, the gospel. And he doesn't, he buries it. Well, I was afraid. I was afraid that they were gonna be mad. I was afraid that you were, you know, a mean taskmaster. And he becomes bound by that.
What would it look like if as believers, we only worried about what Jesus thought about us and not what anybody else? I mean, what could be accomplished in the kingdom?
What if we just became Jesus pleasers?
Yeah.
And he says, go tell them, and if they don't listen, shake the dust and move on. But he says, go tell them.
And I kind of feel that in like what Marcus, you know, you could almost see it as like harshness, but the reality is that opportunity's gone, and we can either spend all of our time looking backwards and living in regret and shame or whatever else, or we can learn from that and be prepared the next time.
That's how I saw it. I mean, charis means grace.
Yeah.
And so everything that God does comes out of his character. So even when he's wrathful, even when it's still coming from places of love, it's not coming from the places of anger and selfishness that we use when we get wrathful. So I'm looking at Marcus and going, what a blessing. Like, yes, this happened, but here comes Marcus to show him what happened, and there's grace in that. Like, he's empowering him. He's telling him God's will for people and giving him the strength to go do it. And you see Nick show up the next time doing that. Had Marcus not come, where would Nick have been with Alex?
Yeah.
I mean, Alex still had a choice. He still ends up dying, but not because an opportunity wasn't given to him for life.
But you remember Marcus one time told him that, you know, when the woodsman carried him across the cavern, he said, if it had been up to us, it wouldn't have ended so well for you. Because he didn't even completely understand the amount of love that the woodman had.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty harsh.
Yeah. Well, and
Or
it truth, you
truth
said you,
tellers.
yeah,
That's
truth,
true.
yeah. yeah.
Because they know what holiness looks like,
That's true,
and they understand how offensive our selfishness and our sin are to God's holiness. We don't understand how offensive it is. Like what you were saying, like we rationalize it, we justify it, we can magnify somebody else's and go, well, look how awful they are, but we've got some spiritual amnesia going on when we forget how much it costs for us to be forgiven.
Alright, so let's talk about the man in the jail cell.
Alright.
That scene is profound.
I mean, I think for me, which I'm so happy about Gordy and hearing and listening to Nick and going out and swinging from the tree. So, you know, to see him set free, and he had been there, what, 16 years?
Yeah.
I think for me though, the most heartbreaking thing was when, I can't remember their names.
Zed's the old.
Roy is that ignored.
Zed, when Zed got up and closed the door. Closed the door, like in prison, and I just, it's like, how many people, so I'm gonna shut up, I wanted to hear, cause I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Christine can write a book about this, I wanna hear what your thoughts on it.
Well, I think
We're all of
sometimes
your
that's
thoughts.
what we do, we close the door on things that are safe to us. He was comfortable there, he felt safe there, that's what he'd always done. And sometimes that's your comfort zone, where you just, that's where you're gonna be. And he didn't see the truth.
He was afraid of what was happening.
Yeah, Roy never even looked up. He just
Yeah.
kept playing his game.
Yeah, he never said anything,
At least that entertained the idea.
And he was walking around free, but he still had his handcuffs on. You know, then later on, he does, you know, and he takes his handcuffs off, and they were unlocked.
Well, that's what I wrote. I wrote handcuffed by our faulty beliefs and living in jails of our own making.
You see it every day.
That we hold on to old mindsets. And then Roy goes on and he talks about, Rosette's talking about Roy, and says his pappy and grandpappy both spent most of their lives in this jail. He knows he's stuck here. He knows he's stuck here. No use fighting a losing battle. And you see Roy just resigned to this place, and I wrote generational curses. Those things that come down from well, everybody else in my family was an addict, so I'm gonna be an addict. Everybody else in my family was angry, so I'm gonna be angry. There's no hope. Lots of people live that way.
I've always heard that people that married a spouse abuser, that beat them and all, that
Yeah.
their kids tended to do the same thing.
That's their comfort
I don't know if
zone.
it's true, I just have read that.
They can, but that's been modeled to
Somebody's
them.
gotta
That's
break
the
the chain.
environment, and it's
Yeah.
been normalized for them growing up. We all do that. We take what we were raised with and we transfer it into our relationships. And we're either trying to resolve it in our marriages or we're just living it out in our marriages. Part of adulthood is to look back at your raising and decide what to keep and what to let go of. And we do it to our own kids too. We don't show up perfect.
How many
There are
times
things-
at this point in our life do we say things and do things and think, I've turned into my mother?
Yes, or you look at your kids and go, oh dear God, I remember. Like, I apologize to my dad often. Now, I'll be talking to him about my kids, and then I'll stop, and this awareness will go across, and he's just over there smiling, and I'm like, I am so sorry, Dad. Because I know I put him through the same types of things. One of the things that really stood out to me was about Zed. It says he's standing only 3 feet from a wide open cell gate, and he's talking to the wind. And he's just telling story after story about his jailroom exploits. He's just telling about his wounds, telling about his battle scars. I challenge my ladies in my step study and a lot of clients and myself too. What are the stories that we just keep telling ourselves over and over and over again that reinforce these beliefs, that reinforce the places where we are stuck in our relationship and stuck in our faith and self-doubt and doubting others and unforgiveness and all of it. There's a narrative that's going on in our head. And the more we share it, the more we spout it, and we're just talking to wind. We don't even care if anyone's listening. We're just saying it, right? A lot of times we're ruminating about it, and it just keeps us trapped. There's no freedom in that. That's why I said jails of our own making. God's already opened that door. He's already paid that price. He's given us a guidebook that tells us the truth about all of it, but we will exchange His truth for our truth, and our truth will rule the day. And you hear the world saying this, well, what's your truth? Everybody has their own truth, and we're not rigorously honest with ourselves, going, where is the lie in the middle of my truth? Like, we're so busy looking for the truth in the middle of everybody else's lies. But all of us, 100% of humanity has stories that we tell ourselves about how we were raised and how people are, and we make judgments and rash decisions and conclusions about people, and we don't even know the full story. We're like, well, I know who they are because I saw this one thing that they did. And we write this whole script about who they are, and it comes with so many emotions and so many behaviors. You know, like we see somebody standing on the side of the road with a sign that says, you know, homeless vet, need food. Well, what's the story you write in your head about them?
They're lazy.
They're lazy. They're on drugs. They're scamming. And some of them are. And because one or two may have in our experience, now we generalize that to all of them. And yet there are legitimate needs out on those streets. There are legitimate needs sitting in our churches. We do that when it comes to homosexuality. Well, they're just this and they're just that. And we miss the heart, the brokenness of the people beneath it. And we do that to ourselves. We look at the areas of our life that are out of order. Or sometimes we do the opposite. We look at the areas of our life that are in order, and we excuse and overlook the ones that are not. And we write these stories, and we live out our stories instead of letting His story live out in us. And that's what I saw in here. And then you see Shad talking about it and going, but they passed the baton to us, and we must. Like, such a dire call to action. We must pass it to those who follow, because our generations are not following. Well, no, they're following. They're following the path that we've paved. We blame them for where they're at, but we paved the path. I was talking to a client yesterday, and I said, we are criticizing the younger generation for being so self-focused when we are the ones who handed out the participation awards. And so Shad really comes at, and we're called to take a look at that, an honest, rigorous look, and come before Christ in humility and repentance, going, I played a part in this, and I'm not to look and judge them until I look at the log in my own eye, because it's showing me the splinter in there. Well, it's made of the same wood. It's the same thing.
Don't you?
Yeah, I get a little passionate about this part.
See, I'm sitting over here giggling because I was like,
No, I love
this
it.
is what I knew was happening. This is what I knew. I knew.
But something else.
But it's for me too, like I could see it in me.
Yeah, alright, but when it very first, when he falls against the door and it opens, right after that, he says, hey, look, it's unlocked, you're free. But the very first thing Zed says, he says, another one of them, you're free jokers. Hey, so how many other people have been by and told them exactly the same thing? So.
And what despair in that statement.
Yeah, and then
That you're
Zed
just
puts his
joking,
foot
I'm
out
not
and he says,
free.
hey, he's telling the truth, so I'm thinking, what is the door must not ever have been open for, but they've had a bunch of people come by. But then I thought back to your audience of one thing, when she was talking about these people with a sign, homeless vet and all, and I think, when we stand before him, is he gonna mention all that? How many times did you drive by that guy over there in front of Dollar Tree that's got the homeless Navy vet or whatever, and you never stopped once to ask him his story, because you already decided what he was.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it doesn't mean we stop and give everybody money, because there's also also good stewardship with things.
Yeah.
But we don't write scripts in our head that write them off.
Yeah.
They're lost, they're going to
God loves
hell,
them
they're
too.
Alex, and they're the blue coat, and they're Nick, and they're us. And by the grace of God, like, I loved what it said about Gordy. Nick is saying, I sang songs of the chasm crosser, hoping maybe the music would get through to them. Gordy remembered. That means somebody told him along the way. Gordy remembered some of the words, and he's saying with me, what if nobody had ever told Gordy? He may have been in the same place as Rory, where he's like, everybody in my family's like this, so I'm gonna be like it too. There's no hope of ever escaping my raising, right? Or maybe he's like Zed, where he's just looking at all the stories, and people keep telling him he's free, but he only experiences imprisonment, and that's all he knows, and he thinks they're joking, and he writes it off with this like sarcastic attitude. But underneath sarcasm is a lot of woundedness.
Right.
And so, and I think that's where Shad goes with it, right? May those who come behind us find us faithful. May our footprints lead them on the path to the King, to the very gates of Charis. Now we have that kind of legacy of faith that we're living out, where we're called to bless people. We don't bless them always with stuff. That's the outpouring of God's blessing. God's blessing is always His presence in our life. And His presence is how He calls us to be with other people, present. We want to shower them with things and not actually show up to be in their story with them. And that has greater value. Like stopping to ask the vet, what is your story? That's presence.
And Gordy, I mean, like you were talking about him, I mean, right off, he's picking up stones. Shad and Blakey there, and Victoria just
He's
said,
excited.
no, that's where I draw it. Victoria still
With
saying, I
joy.
ain't picking up no
He's picking up
stones.
with joy.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah, look, here's another one over
Doesn't
here.
that remind you of people that have come from stories like, as you said, and are saved later in life? Many times they're on fire and they're ready to jump in full force, where those that maybe have been saved as children and brought up in church, and it gets routine for us. But a lot of times the new Christians are they're on fire.
We all have a story.
We've lost.
And how often do we walk past people that are self-imprisoned and they desperately need somebody to stop and just, hey,
Just be there.
yeah, hey, guess what? This door isn't locked. There is a way out.
But then
how
you
many
get
times
back to
do
the
we
Good
do that?
Samaritan though,
Yes.
and, and you walk by and you can say a little prayer and say, well, I pray that you get out of that picture, and there, and you walk on, but, when there's more you're being called to do. And, we may feel sorry for somebody, but if we just go on, what have we missed?
Well, and I think we see those three attitudes played out. You guys just mentioned it with Victoria. I don't haul rocks, like I don't do that. That's where I draw the line. So she dictates her level of obedience. Then you see Nick, I stooped down and half-heartedly fell for the stone. So now he's kind of in it, but kind of out, like riding the fence. And then you see Shad, there's plenty. Shad said gleefully, like a child with his hands in a big bowl of candy, like he is all in. And then you see Gordy kind of join in with that, and I wrote power of like-minded people, how important it is to hang out with like-minded people. Like the Bible over and over and over in the New Testament and the Old Testament says, I'm gonna paraphrase it, like, show me a man's friends and I'll show you the man. Like we become like who we hang out with. And so that's part of the joy of mentoring, right? We're hanging out and we're being mentored by people so that we're being called upward, and then we're mentoring so that we're calling somebody else upward. And partnering in that, not left to their own devices, yes.
Yeah, but, it affected Nick, because, he said that then he opened his bag, and he even laughed because he realized he could open it at night when he couldn't really see down in there, but he couldn't open it when it was light, but he just laughed and got carried away, and said he picked up more stones than he intended, so he making progress.
Yeah, oh, definitely,
I like it.
I do too.
He's a good main character.
Excellent. So we got a little less than 15 minutes, we gotta talk about the tunnel.
Yep.
We gotta talk about the cave, the tunnel. Oh.
Your turn, Gail.
Crawling over those bones. Yeah.
I mean, Shad asked him, you know, I loved how Shad, the thing like, Nick kept having questions, and Shad's like, you answer your own question. You know, he said, have you ever heard anyone say he learned his greatest lessons and developed his strongest character in times of ease? I mean, I think about the valleys and the mountaintops, and while I enjoy the mountaintop times, very little growth takes place. I'm not gonna say no growth takes place on the mountaintops, because we do, but there's a different level of faith when we're in the valleys than when we're on the mountaintop.
Get kind of comfortable on the mountaintop.
Your comfort zone.
Well, it's the recognition of where we've been, right, looking back down, and then the scene where we need to go, looking at the mountaintop ahead of us. Cause mountains come in ranges,
Yeah.
right, just like we don't walk alone on the path, you know, mountains don't grow alone on the path either.
Certainly sheds light on a lot of the pastors and leaders now who preach, become a Christian, and it's easy road.
Yeah, I like how they're like,
The 2 years, right?
didn't Victoria say something along the lines when they're in there, she's like, we should have stayed on the red road, and Shad's like, how do you know this isn't the red road?
Yes.
And you know, I'm like, that's,
The
and,
red road is fun.
and little things too. I mean, you know, there's more, we could probably spend another hour talking about this one thing, but I mean, I love the little things, how the guidebook, illuminated, you know, I mean, and I'm thinking about, oh, you know, your word is a light unto my feet, a lamp unto my path, and showing them the way,
And you know, Victoria, now, Shad gave her a guidebook too, I think, when he gave Nick his, right? And of course, he gave David one, David bartered his away for some goods, but, didn't he give her one too? But it never mentions her looking in her guidebook. I don't know, Lakey got one. I'd have to go back and look and see, but, cause she never talks about reading in the guidebook.
Well, I thought the whole statement that summed up the tunnel was this: there were precious metals hidden in the heart of this mountain waiting to be mined. I thought that was the summary statement of the whole purpose of that. And I liked how that it showed that, you know, it's a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. But also that when they're reading in the dark, and it's because they took the time to memorize it, that they hid the word of God in their hearts, they let it dwell richly within them, and why it's so important for us to be in those places, because we don't always have access, we can't always see, but the word is rich and alive within us, and so you hear them just saying it, and Nick's like, man, I wish I would have read it more, I wish I would have taken it to heart. That it's not just a book we keep on the shelf and occasionally take out.
Well, it lit up in the tunnel. Remember, he said, everyone take out your travel guide. We all fumbled around and found them, now open them. Everyone opened the book at the same time, and suffused light filled the tunnel. I thought that was interesting.
well, and then he lit the match, and then they couldn't see.
Yeah.
When the match went out, the artificial light,
Our attempts to see blind us.
yes. What were your thoughts on the lion? The roar in front and then the roar behind? Was there one line moving? Was there two lines?
I think there's two.
Yeah.
There's the real one and there's the
And the
pretend.
Yeah.
The Bible says he comes like
I
I
lied.
hadn't figured that
Not
out.
as
I
a
didn't know
lion.
for sure.
That's where I went with it. It was,
one good, one evil, and I love what Maliki said, I'd rather be swallowed up by good than evil.
yeah.
Victoria's like, I'd rather not be swallowed up by good at all.
And where are you at there?
It's on 236, But Shad said something really profound, that they're talking about the lion, you see the real lion of Judah roaring, and then you see the enemy pretending, and it even says that, the pretend king, who prowls about seeking to devour us, and we're not always sure what the roar is. But Shad says, well, what do you prefer, to think of God as a lapdog? And I was like, oh, ouch. That was not nice.
Yeah.
Like, we love showing Jesus as the shepherd with the little lamb.
And of course, they found those exact words in the tunnel back on, 233, you know, that were in the cave when the book opened. And he had found out when he talked to Juan that those words were in whatever language that the person reading it spoke. Because Juan, only spoke one language and he saw them in his language.
Well, so all of them so I mean, I think it's pretty evident, everybody started in a like place.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, I've gotta mention this, is, cause it about brought me to tears, whenever they started singing. And how all of a sudden it went from panic and dread and everybody was distraught and afraid, and then they just started singing, and laughter came back, and hope came back, and peace came back, and
Maybe because those 3 words again gave them confirmation that they were still on the red road, cause they were there when they started.
Yeah.
I just thought it was the power of praise,
yes.
thanksgiving. Maybe that's why God says, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of the Father in Christ Jesus concerning you. Because that praise, that gratitude, that thanksgiving becomes our strongest force.
When it never crashed at that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they saw the light ahead.
We gotta talk about how the chapter ended.
Yeah.
Taking a day of rest.
And standing up to.
So that brings up the question in the beginning, when everybody thought Shad was the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
We think he was just another traveler that came back to hell.
But he's pretty wise. He's
I didn't
learned his
think-
lessons the hard way.
Yeah, but I didn't think he was wise here. I actually thought Nick was
I thought they
wise.
could be the Holy Spirit if we thought it out.
But I wanna make sure, cause I went ahead and read the next chapter too, so I wanna make sure that I'm not, cheating, but so like, I think it's the next chapter. I think I need to shut up.
That's why we're not supposed to read ahead, Glenn.
Well, I was like, you know what, I'm
Talked
not gonna
about
be
that.
here next week, and so I was like, it'll be okay. You know,
I
we're
thought you
talking
were
about how we
teaching next
justify,
week, so-
we justify and rationalize.
Yes, about us.
But nobody else is gonna be here either.
Oh, no, it was this one. It was this one?
Alright, good.
Oh, the others, right at the end of 240, Shad marched off pouting. The others looked on wide-eyed and slack-jawed. This was new territory for them. I enjoyed myself. The moment I did it, I knew I should have done it long ago. Oh, as I read that, like I don't know, for me, I didn't really like see this as him like challenging Shad, or I didn't see it as malicious. I kind of saw it as his journey, like he realized, hey, this is who I should have been long ago. Did y'all see it that way, or?
Mhm.
Yeah, it reminded me of Paul talking to Timothy and said, don't let them look down on you
Yeah,
because of your
yeah.
youth. Like, there's still wisdom. They're all exhausted. They're risking injury. The Bible talks about the importance of rest, and that rest wasn't made for God, it was made for us.
Yeah.
And that we need it. God modeled it. They're trying to show them that it says it in the scripture, or the guidebook. They're not just going, hey, we're all good and let's take a break like they were doing at the house.
Right, it was
It
different.
wasn't, yes, it wasn't because, hey, we like all the luxury, it was, we are broken and beaten and worn down, and we have come difficult time
And he said he
in just
convinced
a
them.
day.
Yeah, he said he convinced them that we all had to stand up to shed for his sake as well as ours. And you know, for some reason, it made me think about Artie's first missionary journey with Paul, where he was with Barnabas. And you remember John Mark leaves and gives up, quits too early and everything. And of course, Barnabas I love, he's the encourager, you know, but he couldn't get him to agree about that. But what do? The next missionary journey, Barnabas goes with Mark, Paul takes Silas with him. So now look, they've got more people, you know, and John Mark ends up writing the gospel, you know, he didn't give up on him. But, you know, I don't know, and when I said Chad was wise, I didn't mean wise all the time. I decided he wasn't the Holy Spirit some time ago, but I still look at how many times he encourages Nick through this book, and he's saying, you'll find out, you know, just hang in there, everything's not what you think right now, and that's what I meant. But, yeah, he was wrong here, I think.
Well, and it's a good reminder because you see him not liking him in the beginning, and then you see him putting him up on a pedestal, and how often we do that. Like, I hear that all the time about Nathan and putting him up on a pedestal. And one of the joys that I've had, like, I worked with Nathan for 16 years as his assistant, was seeing the human side of Nathan and being in the relationship with all of who he is and extending grace and compassion because he needs it too. And sometimes there's this expectation put on him, like, you are the spiritual head and you're always right and you should never rest and you should never be weak. And the toll that takes, not just on him, but on, you know, anybody in ministry, or the toll that takes on parents when they're exhausted and they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and the risk that puts people in leadership in. Like, you often see people turning toward their fall then because they've risen so high above.
I love it when people ask me, hey, what's Nathan like? We see him on Sundays, I'm like, let me tell you what he's like. And it's,
And he's changed.
yes.
He's changed over the 16, 17 years I've known him.
You mentioned that in this book too.
Well, good stuff. All right,
So skip a week.
skip a week and we'll pick back
Finish
up.
up.
Yep. All right. Thank y'all for being here.
We're almost to Paris.
Oh, I did like that too. Whenever they come out of the tunnel, hey, we're closer than we've ever been. It was, as they saw it.
Yeah. I'm excited